AskReddit. Teachers, what was the best smartass response from a student you have heard? Part 1. Back when I taught first grade, we were doing a writing assignment about Thanksgiving. The kids had to draw a picture of their family celebrating Thanksgiving, and then write about it. One little girl drew the table and chairs, and that was all. I knew she just didn't feel like doing the work, so I tried to prompt her. I asked where the food and her family were, and she snapped right back with, "They're washing the dishes." Had to give her credit for coming up with a logical argument for not doing the work. Honestly, that's all I remember from Thanksgiving when I was really young. Doing the dishes and waiting until I could finally sit down somewhere that wasn't an awful kitchen chair. Not a teacher, but witnessed as a student. There was literally 30 seconds left of class, and my buddy starts to pack up. The teacher didn't seem to mind, but when the bell rang and Buddy got up to leave, the teacher said the classic line, "The bell doesn't dismiss you, I do." And Buddy just continues to leave, gets in the doorway of the class and says, "If it decides when I come, it decides when I leave," and just leaves the class. Used to have a girl in my class who would just leave at random moments and no one stopped her. She'd return 20 minutes later with a coffee or something. If anyone else dared do this, they'd get what for. I think it's because the teachers knew that getting her in trouble didn't change her behavior. My grandson, who lives with my wife and I, was sent to the office one day for breaking the dress code. No belt. The principal asked why he didn't wear it, to which he replied, "My mother stole it and I didn't have time to get another." Principal got super mad and called us to tell us what had happened and what he had said. I confirmed his story. Well, his mother came to visit last night and we didn't realize it was gone until this morning. I could audibly hear him gasp over the phone and immediately started apologizing. And every time I see him now, he mentions it and apologizes. A belt is part of the dress code? Wow. My American friend wasn't pulling my leg. In Europe, belts are just for keeping loose trousers up. Most public schools here don't have a dress code this serious, but some do. I had a teacher tell a classmate, "No drinks in class." He got up from his seat, picked up the teacher's drink, and deposited it in the garbage with his drink. She sent him to the office. I'd say it's fair of the kid to do that. I was doing poorly in a middle school class on account of my mother having terminal brain cancer. This one teacher would constantly get on my case, even though he knew about the situation. I wasn't a bad student. I was just severely distracted from the situation at home and couldn't always focus. I missed 2 days of school due to her worsening condition. The day before she died, he left a voicemail at my house explaining my 5 missing homework assignments, but no one really cared. I didn't go to school for a week after her death, and when I returned, I said to him, "Well, now that she's dead, I can finally finish those assignments, right?" I think he finally understood. The principal gave him a good chewing out, too. This was while working with 9-year-olds. We're doing number problems, and a kid is having trouble with a sum. The sum is, you have 40 sweets. You give half your sweets to your friend. How many sweets do you have? I grab 40 counters and say to the kid, "Here are 40 sweets. If you give me half, how many will you have left?" Kid turns to me and utterly deadpan says, "I can't give you the sweets. You aren't my friend." 9 seems a little old to be having a hard time with half of 40. I guess the context of this kid having particular educational challenge explains that for you. Tangentially related, smartass response from teacher on behalf of the student. Had a student that came back a couple of weeks out of class. Counselor let the teachers know that his father had passed and he was having a rough time. I pulled him aside after class one day, told him not to worry about any of the work he's missed. Focus on getting caught up in your other classes. I'll make things work out here. I was his 10th grade English teacher. We had already taken the end of year exam. As far as the state was concerned, he was done, and that was good enough for me. Kid was straight A's until his dad passed. Cut to a few weeks later, I'm called into the counselor's office for a meeting with the student's other teachers. I double-check and he's been doing great in class, and work I've assigned has been turned in on time even though I told him he didn't have to. So I have no idea what's going on. Come to find out, his other teachers weren't as lenient on the makeup work as I was. He had gotten behind in all his other classes and had stayed behind. Now he was in danger of failing everything but my class. He'd have to repeat the year save for English. Counselor asked me what I did to help the student. Oh, well, I told him not to worry about anything he missed, and that as far as I was concerned, he was already caught up and he could do his best in class going forward. One of the other teachers balked. I don't see why we needed Mr. Hex Dragon's input. He just let the kids skip out on work. That's not helpful. I replied, the kid's dad just died. You really think the last 6 weeks worth of history matters to him in the slightest? The counselor smiled and pointed at me. I invited Mr. Hex Dragon because I knew he would say some things I'm not allowed to say. Did they pass the kid? Yeah. After the meeting with the counselor, who already had the approval of the vice principal and principal, the other teachers excused the student from a lot of his missing work. A couple of them wanted to stick to their guns, so we ended up barely passing some of his classes, but he didn't have to repeat anything. School year ended, and after the summer, he had no more serious academic issues. I saw him in the halls and talked to him a few times after he was in my class. I don't know that I could have bounced back as quickly as he did. A fellow student in my class shouted that it was effing freezing in the classroom. The teacher naturally told him not to use the F word, so the kid replied, "It's effing cold in here." Had my class of working class kids at an art gallery. As we waited for our tour to begin, we played on the small playground near the door. A prep school kid in a uniform approached 2 of my boys and said, "I bet I'm smarter than you are." I watched to make sure no blood was drawn. My students can hold their own pretty much anywhere, and they don't accept insults casually. But they were cool. "No, you're not. Are you in grade 2? The boy said he was, and one of my boys said, "So, then we're all grade 2. So we're all grade 2 smart." He went back to climbing the monkey bars. But the prep school kid continued, "I know I'm smarter. Let's do some math and I'll prove it." The toughest kid in my room looked this guy square in the eye and said, "Well, I'm smart enough not to do math when I'm having fun on a playground." I thought he was going to say something like, the prep school kid wasn't good at math because he failed to realize he was outnumbered. My history teacher would spend half the class making jokes directed at the students. One student in particular always took the jokes on the chin and never really made any comebacks. Eventually, the teacher called him out and jokingly lectured him about standing up for himself. He ended his rant with, "You've got to be a man. You've got to be like me." The student replied with, "Well, which one? Do you want me to be a man or do you want me to be like you?" Did the teacher survive? It was dicey for a while, but after multiple skin grafts, he's returned home. His teaching career is over, though. In high school, our functions and relations teacher would always start to say something, forget it, and say, "I lost my train of thought." Well, one day a buddy of mine replies, "It's okay, sir. There were no important passengers on board." To turn the question around, I was in class once and one of the students said, "Wait, I had a thought." And my teacher responded, "Was it lonely?" Why are you all talking? Because you're not. 2nd grade. Kid was sent out of the room. This is in regard to the rule, don't talk when the teacher's talking. I got in trouble once in elementary school because my teacher said, "If you want to talk, you have to raise your hand." I then raised my hands and proceeded to finish telling my best friend a story. Thing is, I legitimately thought it was just some weird rule that only people with their hands in the air could speak. I wasn't even trying to be smart or anything. I'm not a teacher, but I had a friend in school who was always pretty dramatic. She actually did have IBS though. So we're in this teacher's class and she keeps asking to use the bathroom. The teacher says no. My friend's like, "I have IBS though." And the teacher is like, "Tell me what those initials mean and I will let you go." So she screams, "It means I have to," and takes off out of the room. A more common version of this is, girl, "Can I use the bathroom?" Male teacher, "Yes." Girl, picks up bag. Male teacher, loudly. Why do you need a bag to go to the toilet? Student A says to student B, dude, shut the F up. Staff says, student A, we don't talk that way. In the future, find a more appropriate way of expressing yourself. Student A says to staff, oh sorry, then turns to student B and says, dude, would you please shut the F up? Not a teacher, but some kid was cussing a blue streak in social studies and another kid told the teacher. Teacher confronts kid saying, Tom says you were swearing. Kid replies, that's BS. Well, this one was during coaching classes for entrance exams. The math teacher reduced a given problem to a simpler form and challenged the students. So this expression doesn't fit any of the given standard forms for us to find the particular integral. So what do you propose we do? A kid from the back shouted, the next question. Let me point out that I'm a female since people will assume I'm a guy. We were talking about prime numbers, so I would have kids give me a number and we'd work out if the number was a prime number on the board. One kid wasn't paying attention, so me being a young teacher, I thought I'd catch him off guard and call on him. It went something along the lines of, Mark, do you have a number? Huh? I need your number. Jeez, play it cool, girl. We can talk after class. The whole room lost themselves, and I turned red from embarrassment. They then laughed at how red I got. This is one of my only complaints about being white. Everyone can tell if I'm embarrassed, and all of my non-white friends think it's hilarious. In a high school physics class, we were learning about friction and what varies how strong it is. So the teacher asks, so as an engineer, what would be some of the hard parts of designing, say, racing tires? Some kid in the back says, getting out of bed in the morning. That's pretty much the hardest part about engineering anything. Spanish class in high school. Two guys who grew up in Spanish-speaking families were goofing off at the back of the class. One guy says that he could stand the weight of another person standing on his stomach, and the other guy, who is probably just shy of 200 pounds, doesn't believe him. So the first guy gets on the ground in the back of class, and the other guy gets up and stands on his stomach. The teacher sees this and immediately yelled at the guy on the ground to get back into his seat. Without missing a beat, he says, I can't, he's standing on me. The other guy doesn't move because he wasn't yelled at. Meanwhile, the teacher continues to be upset that the guy on the ground isn't listening to her.